Welcome to Draft Sickos, the show where we talk about everybody from the biggest stars to the deepest sleepers. I'm your host, Maxwell Baumbach, joined by this week's special guest star of the show. He is the host of the Roster Reconstruction podcast with Swish Theory, as well as the Round Ball Ramble with Sports Ethos. He is Corbin Ford. Corbin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm muted. Show I mute myself. I love that. So thank you. It's a classic, Maxwell. But I'm doing great. I'm pumped. I'm excited. A little too nervous, as you can see, but happy to be on here. As I feel like the radio calling, I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. That sort of thing.
Sure.
That's me with no ceilings.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. Anytime we need fill-ins and stuff like that, we always keep like a running list in our Slack of like who are the people that we want to have, and you were always the guy that's on there. So we're glad to finally link it up, make it happen, have you on one of our podcasts. So we are going to kick it right off with the winners of the week. So this week, the first guy that we both kind of mentioned, like when we were collaborating, putting this together, was Jared McCain from Duke. So Jared McCain he had a rough one the other day, but he's been on like a real hot streak otherwise. So dropped 21 points on 11 shots against Baylor, 24 points against Queens. So like Queens is one of those teams that like new to Division One, not a great record, but like they sneaky like have some guys, especially at the guard spots. So maybe one of those games it's a little bit better than people might realize as far as having a game against a team like that. And then 18 points against Syracuse. He has really sort of started to build a 2024 case for himself. I think he was one of those guys where coming to the year, some people had him top 60, some people that really liked him had him top 30, and then he went quiet for a little bit. But with these freshmen, you never know. Sometimes they get hot. They put it together later in the year. He's now really kind of cooking, and I think even in a class with so many small guards, because of his dynamism as a scorer and just how efficient he's been, I think he's really in that conversation, especially because he's got a more athletic build than a lot of other guards. Where were you with Jared McCain coming into the season, and how has this recent stretch changed your opinion, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's definitely helped. It has definitely helped. He was somebody that was in. I mean, this is the first, I want to say, the second full year I've really gone full 60 and trying to like find where to piece players together. He was definitely in that middle of the second round, I want to say. At my initial one, just because I'd heard about him, I did some reading, and I was like, you know what? I can see him at the place in the league, boom. But he's been on a heater, man. And what I love about him is like he knows his role. I think so many players in this draft class in general, it's like, hey, if they come in, like what role will they fit? Like ideally, if you could sell a team on, we'll talk about Rob Dillingham and like whether his scoring outweighs his defensive, inadequacies, whatever the case may be, then this can be a good fit. But I feel like with McCain, he's found a role where it's okay. He's a scorer. Like he's going to come in, he's going to shoot the ball really well. He's going to give you energy on defense. He's going to bring you passion, at least. Like he's a guy who can slot in at 6'3", definitely, like you said, more of a scorer than somebody who's passing the ball. And, up until his most recent game, he's been really hot. But you can come in and say, hey, this guy's going to come space the floor for you, maybe get buckets off the bench, whatever the role is. It's definitely more in that scoring area. But it's at least a defined role for him. And so I've been a bigger fan of him. He's definitely moved up as someone who, especially with some offensive creation that I didn't know that he was kind of flashed a little bit here and there that I wasn't quite sure of. He's definitely moved up on my board for sure.
That's, in the creation that you touch on toward the end, I think is like a real thing that doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet for him. Because I think a lot of times, if you are coming in from the outside and you're just starting to get in the draft and you see, okay, here's Jared McCain, he's a 6'2", 6'3" guard from Duke. All right, I love the efficiency, right? Like that's going to be the first thing that pops on paper. He's scoring 12 points a game, 45, 43.8, 90.5 splits. Like very, very efficient scorer. But where people might get a little bit scared off is the 1.8 assists per game, the 11.5 assist rate, which is really low for a guard. But I do think context matters quite a bit there. This is a really guard-heavy team. You've got Tyrese Proctor. You've got Caleb Foster. You've got Kyle Filipowski kind of growing as a passer for others. I've always thought Mark Mitchell's a really underrated passer and decision maker. So, like, his playmaking opportunity isn't very big, and I think he's doing a really good job of, like, leveraging his gravity as a scorer. And he doesn't always get rewarded for it. But this is a guy who, like, he knows when he uses his fake and gets by his man and gets to the elbow and help comes over. He knows where that help's coming from. He's ready to hit the open man. I think he's a lot savvier than the numbers probably indicate. And this is like, I recognize how old man of a take this is, but like Jared McCain, he just like plays like a winner. You know what I mean? Like he has that fire, that competitiveness, that swagger to him where I think even with like the slower start, like I don't think you can shake that kid. Like I think he's really confident. I don't think he's going to get down on himself. And I think when you are entering the NBA and you're going to face like setbacks and obstacles and mental challenges, like he just seems like somebody who's kind of cut from the cloth that's not going to shake him too much. And I think having that short memory and being able to respond in that way, and again, like we're going to talk about a lot of the same stuff with Rob Dillingham, like I think that's a really good trait. I think it's something that gets overlooked, especially with guards a lot of the time. We'll talk about this little bit later too, but with smaller guards, kind of I guess falling out of favor, falling out of style. Do you worry about that with Jared McCain, or do you kind of see him as like, look, he's got a strong body, and the role is he's such a good shooter that maybe some of those concerns aren't as big of a deal for him as they would be like a less athletic non-scoring guard?
Yeah, I definitely lean toward the latter there. Like, I mean, his
Mhm.
frame, he's strong, he's solid. Like, I think he'll hold
Yep.
up pretty well. And that shot, I mean, the shooting, we're in the league value
Mhm.
shooting now more than probably ever before, right? And you're right.
Yeah.
Like, guards, I think undersized guards have gotten a knock, but from the rudimentary research I've done, I feel like a lot of it
Mhm.
is guards who aren't really good scorers or aren't really good
Yeah.
shooters, rather. And so
Yeah.
then it's like,
Shooters
okay, well,
especially. Yeah.
yeah. So then it's okay. Like you got to the rim at ease in college. That's great. All well and good. Now we're at a different level. It's a little harder. And your jump shot, which was iffy in college, has not gotten better. Like I feel like the jump shot is a big swing factor. And he has that
Mhm.
in spades, right? He's somebody I think shooting the three ball well, very good for mid range. And even better, we talked about self creation. He's good at getting creation into the mid range. Like he's good at getting to a shot.
Very good.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's a skill I mean, I want to say you can't teach per se, but it's a skill that is in short variety among certain smaller guards um,
Yep.
coming in, I would say. So I definitely feel high about that. At the very least, if you can space the floor, I think you're good. Like he can make a simple
Mhm.
pass. That's great. Like you're right. Not really advanced reads per se, but, take advantage of a closeout, run a pick and roll, find an open guy off of a short corner, like that type of stuff. If you can do that and attack a closeout real quick and your gravity just opens up so much on the floor anyway, that works. Like yeah, maybe you're more
Mhm.
of the combo guard than like
Yeah.
due to his size than like your standard shooting guard, and he's definitely not a point guard as of right now, but I definitely think there's a role for him even on a team like, I mean, the Pelicans employ those guards all the time, right? If you look at season
For
McCollum,
sure.
like
Yeah.
Jordan Hawkins, like these kind of they're more combo guards. They kind of handle the
Mhm.
ball, but so yeah, I definitely feel really solid about McCain's ability at the next level. Again, on a team where his role is defined, like you can just come in there and do your job.
For sure. And I've been kind of thinking about him in the vein of like guards who've stuck that weren't the most like vertically explosive but could really shoot it. And I feel like that is a type of guard that has a much better success rate. Like
Hmm.
statistically, he's pretty similar to where Peyton Pritchard was during his final college
Mm,
season, where like he's not the biggest rim pressure guy and like McCain struggles as a finisher, but it's worth noting that he's obviously younger than Peyton Pritchard was in his final pre-draft season. But even like a guy like Devonte Graham is a guy who's like carved out a long role and a long-term role, and I think he's probably got a little bit more like mid-range kind of self-creation sauce than a guy like Devonte Graham does, where
agreed.
it's just more of a shooter. Like I think he's gonna make it. Like he's a guy that I probably sagged down a little bit too much on my last board, but the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, maybe he's not like a superstar, but like this is a guy who I think is gonna play in the NBA. Like I think he's really started to make his mark.
No, absolutely.
Um,
And with performances like this, even all the better for it, right?
for sure, absolutely. So let's get into Tajin Salon, who is really kind of having himself a run as well. So he is playing for Calais in France, and he's really, really hot right now. So he struggled out of the gate. And me and Steven talked about him earlier in the year. And like through the first couple games, he was like 30 something percent from the field, like 23% from three. And he was one of those guys that just like you watch it and you're like, I don't think he's that bad. Like, I don't think I think he's better than the numbers suggest. And now he is really on a run. He's 42% from the field, 38% from three, and 76% from the free throw line. Salaun is 18 years old, so he's not going to turn 19 until shortly after the draft. 6'9", listed at 203 pounds. Really bouncy, really athletic. And the reason we wanted to bring him up is because he has been filling out his frame nicely. So I think body wise, like he's in a much better place than he was even coming into the season. And he has been rocketed up to number 6 on ESPN's most recent board. So it seems pretty obvious that like teams are really starting to buy into Salaun. Um, Over his last couple of games, he's got a 24-point outing, a 13, a 18, an 8, a 14, and a 6. Like he's just like really started to put up the numbers as a scorer.
Mhm.
Jumper looks a lot better. I thought there was some wonky energy transfer stuff with it, but the top of it always looked really good, and now that's a lot more consistent. Initial impressions for you of Salaun, and what are you kind of seeing with his game?
Yeah, I like Salon. I think a lot of it for me was putting it all together
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
he really does have. I mean, at 6'9", like, well, I think still probably going to be 6'10", like still growing, I would
yeah.
imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only 18, and having not played basketball as long as some of the other guys in this class, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, it was the fact that he is explosive, he is super athletic, and again, his jump shot, another swing skill for me. But in the mid range, I thought he was pretty decent. At
Yep.
least getting there. I thought he had a variety of moves as far as scoring down there that was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And the self creation, and not even that, but just what he can be potentially as a facilitator at that size. Like, yes, if he can
Yeah.
leverage his scoring there, better. But I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on that because I think that that's the thing that exists, and the potential is very much there.
So I think, yeah, I think that's where like I have a harder time with him. So
Mm,
I, I think like the framework here is obviously awesome. Like I think he's 6'9". I really do buy the shot. Um, I think there is a very clear role that he can play because he's a really high work rate guy. Like he's always moving around. Like he's running around. He's moving into a shot. He's screening. He's cutting. So, so obviously like much different sizes, but a guy like Ochai Agbaji was the guy at Kansas where it's like this guy can definitely shoot. He's definitely an athlete, and he can definitely be a lob target. And I with Salon, I look at him and I'm like, all right, well, he's 6'9". So like he can probably do that offensive role, if nothing else. I think you
mhm,
were spot on with some of the self-creation stuff. It's nasty. Like he is putting guys on skates, like he's hitting step
mhm,
backs. Like it's not a all the time thing just yet, but it's like for a guy who's 18 and 6'9" to be doing this sort of thing. And like you mentioned later to the game, like I love to see that out of him. I want to see the passing come along a lot more. And I think I'm worried just more about the connective elements of his game. Just because I don't think he looks to pass enough. But I think to your point, I think about where a guy like Kyle Kuzma was coming out of college, where he was a guy who
mm,
could do a little bit of that stuff. And then slowly the gears start to turn and he starts to understand, okay, well, here's how the defense responds when I do these things, and here's how I can capitalize off of it. I think that's a real possibility within Salon's game because I don't know, guys that can dribble like that, I feel like it's a much easier process than like a guy who can't do anything with the ball, like suddenly
mhm.
becoming a creator.
I agree.
Yeah, so I do think it's a real path for him.
Mm,
Um, I kind of worry about the defense weirdly. Like I think he'll get to a point where he's acceptable. I think the defensive tape right now is pretty bad. Like he's so athletic and he doesn't block a lot of shots. He's really good at using his length to like create steals and stuff like that off the ball, like good in passing lanes.
mhm,
But I'm always kind of astounded by how hard of a time he has containing the ball. Like his stance isn't very good. His hips look like weirdly stiff. Like he has kind of a hard time staying in front for a guy with his
mhm.
measurables. Do you see that coming around? Or do you think that he's more of just like a vertical athlete and maybe the lateral stuff is a problem? Or do you think that's just a kid who's 18 years old and probably hasn't really been honed in on much on that side?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a
Hmm.
mix because for me, I definitely like the first thing I thought was okay. Like vertically, you're right. Like you, with as athletic as you are, I would expect to be more of a force on that end, or potentially not even a force, but just flashing some more of that. But
Yep.
I looked at just want him to be stronger, like stronger, and the footwork were things I was thinking of because you're right. The hips. I'm a big fan of the Shakira. Hips don't lie. His hips are saying some things. I don't know if what they saying the right thing defensively, right? But
Hmm.
like it isn't. I mean, it's as graceful and as fluid as he is on the offensive end. I don't think he's learned to harness those athletic gifts that he uses on that end to the defensive side. But I
Completely
feel
agree.
like he
Hmm.
can. I feel like he is young enough,
Yeah.
and those things can come together. But they haven't yet. And some players it does happen, and some it never does. You look at players. I mean, I think of a few. I'm like, okay, you offensively you're great. You've always had the defensive tools, but why are you not a better defensive player? For whatever
Yeah.
reason. So he falls like he could be in there, but I'm willing to
Hmm.
bet on his upside because he is so young. They potentially at least gets one of those two things together: size, strength,
That's
not size, strength, or vertical defense.
yeah, yeah. That's where I'm kind of with you. I think and I think he's like a tricky guy to project because like on paper, like I said, like I think when you were that tall and you can shoot and finish above the rim, like it's almost hard not to just keep getting opportunities. Like even if he's a guy that struggles out of the gate or has a rough time on his first contract, like someone's going to take another bite at that apple. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think like especially in a class like this, do I wish he was a better connected player? Do I wish he did more on the glass? Do I wish the defense was further along? I do. Um, but I also kind of think he's just like worth a lottery range pick at worst by virtue of having the stuff that he has at his age.
Oh yeah, just on the upside play alone, like you said, he's a
Mhm.
guy. I don't want to compare him to this guy exactly, but I felt the same way about like a GG Jackson in the
Sure.
sense
Yeah.
of like just in the potential of what he could bring, and maybe puts together, and
Mhm.
maybe he doesn't, and they're not
Yeah.
all the same players. I'm just saying the same type of idea of like a
Mhm.
young player still putting things together, but you take the chance because he does have this tantalizing potential that you can even harness a bit of it is at least a
Mhm.
serviceable NBA player.
Exactly. And like I so it's funny. I ended up scrapping it, but like part of what I wrote for like what it was initially going to be the lead into my column this week is like the draft is about hitting and finding value and like finding guys that will be tough to trade for or acquire in free agency later on. And like
Mm,
if Salaun hits, that's what he is.
hmm
I think just from a draft philosophy standpoint, that's definitely a guy that teams would be wise to take a bet
I
on.
like that for sure. Absolutely.
So we're going to take a quick break. We will be back and talk about some guys that we've been kind of focused in on, starting with Rob Dillingham. So stick with us. We'll be right back on the other side. All right. So you mentioned Rob Dillingham is a guy. I know that Tush Theory, you guys are putting together a big project. I believe it's is it a board or a mock that you guys are putting together right now?
I think it's a board. It's a board from what I remember because we're picking players that we did a consensus mock very much like y'all do and kind of got them
Mhm.
together and then
Yep.
picked players to talk about. So I'm high on Dillingham. So I'm glad when you brought it up and I was like,
Mhm.
Rob, and you were like, yeah, we could do that. I'm like, let's go.
Mhm. It's been too long since we talked about it on our show, and I would encourage everybody to keep an eye out for that. From Swish Theory, put out some like really awesome boards last year. A lot of people that do great work in. I was gonna say the draft space, but really kind of every space. Like there's a little bit of everything over there now. So
Mhm.
definitely go check that out. The Finding a Role series has been something I've really enjoyed this year. Lots of good work over at Swish
Yeah.
Theory. So keep an eye out for everything in general over there, but especially the big board project. So you mentioned that Rob Dillingham was one of the guys that you're focusing on for that. Uh, give us kind of your take on Rob Dillingham because like first off, I got to eat a lot of crow. Like when we were doing like the preseason podcast on him, I didn't think he was
Mhm.
good. It's funny. I talked to two different people at Swish before the year. I was like, who are guys that you're high and low on? And like I was like, I'm low on Rob Dillingham. Like I was just straight up like, that's the guy that I'm low on. And like man, I could not have been more wrong. I've loved the work he's done this year, but kind of take us through why you're so excited about him as a draft prospect. 6'2"
Yeah.
guard out of Kentucky.
Oh, absolutely. I think. I mean, I'm very much like you. I wasn't as loud and proud about my questioning of Dillingham, but I really was,
Mhm.
especially out of OT. I was like, is he really a good guard? And didn't mean that disrespectfully, or is he more of a product of the type of play that OTE has, right? Which is a lot of up and down. Like, yeah, I mean, I think I'd look half decent, just being funny, in a scenario like that. So I wanted to see how much that was going to translate to Kentucky, and he's been a reliable on-ball creator, a three-level scorer, like legit, and I would say a premier
Mhm.
offensive talent for them. And
Yeah.
what's gotten me, yes, his scoring is amazing. Like his shiftiness, his speed, his ability to kind of change direction, navigate in downhill attacks has been really good. But I
Mhm.
think it's in combination with the shooting. He leverages his speed and shiftiness getting to the basket with the fact that he has an amazing floater package, the fact that he can shoot the ball from mid range, the fact that he's drilling it from deep. Like it's hard to stop him at any level, especially when he's really getting cooking. And I've loved his ability to shoot the ball not only from range but also from movement off the screens. Able to do that, and that works at all levels. And I've loved that. But I think as much as I love the scoring, he's my type of guy from a scoring perspective. Those small scoring guards, I have a type
Mhm.
for that. But what I've loved is his passing, which
Yes.
I definitely was sleeping on. Like
Uh-huh.
his passing is extremely high level. Some of the reads he's able to make, and that's one thing I noticed. And when I did my write up, I was saying is like for a player whose floor game was kind of questioned coming into college, it has really stood out. And I've loved the fact that he's been able to make adept passes from basically any offensive situation. whether that is, from the pick and roll, or if it is skip passes to the corner on the move, whatever the case may be, like that has increased his versatility from an offensive perspective, because you could reasonably slide him in, in my mind, at the next level at point guard
Yep.
and get away with that. Maybe not full time. I feel like he's more of a combo guard, but he actually fits that combo guard spot to me.
Yeah, I like legit think he's a point guard. Like I really buy the passing. I mean, you talked about the separation, the speed, and like that is just what makes him so special when you have that kind of touch. So there's just so much I want to get into of like why people should be excited about him. So 13.7 points per game, 46% from the field, over 41% from three on good volume, 77% from the free throw line. He is exceptional at creating space. And I think what differentiates him from a lot of young players that can create space, because there's a lot of guards that can score and have these like side steps and step backs and dribble moves and combinations to get themselves space, whether it's north, south, east, west, whatever. Is I think Rob is a little bit more methodical and clever than he gets credit for, especially with how he uses ball screens. Like he will toy with guys, he will reuse screens, he will reject screens. Like he's unpredictable in a more polished way. And I think it almost gets overlooked because people are just like, oh man, he makes cool shots. And I think when guys make cool shots, sometimes the rest of their game can get overlooked. And I think
the process of that.
Yeah. I think he's way more intelligent as like an on-ball creator than he gets credit for. And yeah, like you mentioned, the passing is really good. He's really sharp. He sees things quickly. He can really whip the ball to guys too, which is something I always value a lot. When it's you see the read and the ball is just there. There's always enough zip on his passes. A guy who's rebounding better than you would think. Like he has like a defensive rebound rate over 14, which like just kind of a good sign. The size, so I think he's been a little better defensively than I thought. Like the speed helps for sure. Ability to read the floor helps. What do you make of the concerns about his defense and his size? Because it's something that I kind of go back and forth on, where yes, he is very small, and yes, he doesn't have a lot of length. But if nothing else, guys like Ish Smith have carved out really long NBA careers and keep getting opportunities. A guy like Dennis Schroeder is a guy who's really small that's had a good career. And I just think he's coming in with so much more polish than a guy like Kira Lewis that I don't see him like struggling to catch on. And that's so. What do you make of the defensive concerns? And are you worried about it? How worried are you about it? Like, because I do think teams are going to isolate and hunt him. Like teams mismatch hunt, especially smaller guards more than ever. Like I think it will be a problem, but I don't think it stops him from having a long NBA career.
I kind of hedge on that because I agree with you. I think he's definitely going to find a role. I think you take the chance regardless. I feel he's more like defensively body type, maybe like Bones Highland type in my mind than like in terms of like body, then maybe a like Shooter. I feel like same size but long. You know what I mean? Like people discount. Shooter's length is different, right? For his size, I'm saying, and he was able to make like you said, activity, steals, that sort of thing. I almost want Ish Smith actually feels like a very good kind of comp in that way because I wanted. I mean, my idea if he could get more, and maybe it's nice body. I'm not really sure. I'm not that deep into like the scouting yet, but like like I totally like what kind of how much he can hold up in terms of girth, because ideally you'd like his effort is great. I love his effort. I love his activity. I think he does generate a good amount of steals. I think it's just his athleticism is somewhat negated on that end just because of his lack of height and mass there defensively. And it's not like a Fred VanVleet who's small but can kind of hold up in certain situations. You don't really get that from Dillingham. And so I do feel like, NBA teams are definitely going to go after him on that end. And is he going to do enough on one end to negate the other? Is he more Lou Williams in that way?
Sure,
possibly, especially like you said, his passing is very good. His scoring is great, and defensively he tries, and I think that's great. But I do think that it's not even his fault. But it's going to be an issue in my mind just because I don't know. It's a mix of both. Like I think in some ways he can use his speed to kind of negate some of that. He can anticipate. Guard. I feel like guards who have good, well, for the most part, on the offensive end who can see angles, can see passes, and do that. Well, on the defensive side, they almost become cornerbacks because they can see it too because they would do it. And so in some cases, I definitely feel that would work in Dillingham's favor. But yeah, in like a straight ice situation or a hunt down on a switch, yeah, all the effort, all the hustle, you're not going to be anything more than 6'2", at this point in time, 170.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's going to be an issue. So I still think he'll find a role. I still feel confident about him in the league, obviously, but I'm not optimistic about his defensive upside. At least at this moment.
Sure.
That can change.
So with Jared McCain, let's circle back to him real quick. Like having that defensive mass, do you think the gap between them on boards, like a lot of people still have McCain more second round, Dillingham like Lotto. Do you think maybe that gap is smaller than people think? And if so, do you think that's a feather in Jared McCain's hat, or do you think that's like maybe the Dillingham defensive concerns are more severe and Jared McCain also being a skilled shot maker, even if he's not as clever or shifty, maybe he should be more in that hunt? Because I think one thing I will give Dillingham credit for is I think he's a much better finisher than people realize because he is so quick and has such touch and such great body control at the rim.
No, I agree.
I just think with Dillingham, the way that he creates and the setups are so good that like I still have him firmly above McCain, but I could see an argument for them being closer than maybe the public has them.
Yeah, I mean, right now I could see Dillingham being like in the right situation, like a secondary offensive engine. And I say that in a way of like, you give him the ball, he can create shots for himself and others. I mean, again, I bring up Lou Williams, but Lou Williams wasn't like a main guy, like in terms of like a star per se, but he ran the Clippers bench units for a couple of years. Like he ran like units. Like that was what he did. He could come in and play along your stars as a floor spacer. I think Dillingham brings even more passing, from that end and from a small guard who can kind of heat up in a hurry. But I think he is somebody who can like run an offense, I don't want to say on his own, but like be a primary contributor there. Whereas I feel McCain is very solid in creating his own, but I feel in some way is playing off of others, right? He's making the basic reads on the offensive end. He can definitely get into a shot, but he's going to play within the flow of a team. Whereas I think you can kind of put guys around, Dillingham, and then Dillingham will go out there and make it happen from an offensive perspective.
For sure.
And that's no disrespect to McCain because you're right. Defensively, there's some value in being able to hold up a little bit better and be solid there. But I do I feel like Dillingham is so much more versatile, on the offensive end, in terms of what he brings value wise. That yes, defensively it is bad. Like I mean, but it's effort. It's not like he's bad and it's not trying. It's some of the stuff he just can't control. So I still feel like maybe McCain should be moved up a little bit more. Yeah, absolutely. Just given where he's been recently. But I think Rob is exactly where he should be.
Awesome. I'm right there with you. Let's move on to Yves Missi. I've got a feature coming out on him tomorrow. I love Missi. I think he is still kind of underrated by the general consensus. I think there's lottery value potentially here. Missi is a 7 foot tall freshman from Baylor. Awesome body, like already 235 pounds. Stellar athlete, like very good vertical athlete. Very good laterally, awesome on switches. So he's a guy who I see coming into the league and on the defensive end of the floor being incredibly scheme versatile. In drop, he does need to polish up a little bit. I worry about him. Like, I mean, you worry about like everybody against Jokic and Embiid, but right now, I think he bites on a lot of stuff in the post. Like he's got to get better with his like on a post up, just his positioning, his discipline. Same thing with drop a little bit, like just kind of continuing to round that out. This is a guy that didn't start playing basketball until 6 years ago, though, so I'm not like losing sleep over this. I think he's going to put it together. But great anticipation, a guy who can jump passing lanes at 7 feet tall, which is something you just do not see very often. So whatever team, whatever scheme rather, an NBA team is going to want to play on the defensive end of the floor, I think Missi's going to be able to do it and do it really well. His block rate just to dip down a little bit, but he did have a steal rate over 10 and a block rate over 10 and a steal rate over 3 as of the other day. So that is something that among high major freshmen, I don't believe had been seen since Isaiah Jackson and then Joel Embiid before him. Like it's special to be able to create plays on the defensive end like that. It's just something you don't see very often, if ever. Offensively, it's a really simple game. He catches lobs and he dunks. He is an extremely low assist guy, which is concerning. But I don't think he's selfish. I think the role is just so play finisher oriented that, like, yeah, you see a 2% assist rate and you're like, whoa, what's going on with that?
Yikes.
But guys like Jared Allen, and even I mentioned this in the article, Bam Adebayo had an assist rate of 5 at Kentucky. Like sometimes in college, bigs just do not get the chance to do anything other than finish plays. And I think with Baylor having like 6 guards that are all awesome, that's just kind of the role he's put into. But a stellar lob catcher and a historically good offensive rebounder, like an outrageously good offensive rebounder, offensive rebounding rate over 20. The only other guy that I have that's been like a real prospect that's done that is Jared Vanderbilt in like the last 10
Mm.
years. So really, really special on the offensive glass. Just a guy that is a nightmare to cover because like you have to box him out every single play or else like he just will get a putback. I thought he did great in the matchup against Kyle Filipowski. You really ate him up. I just love to use Missi. I see some on defense. I see some Nick Claxton in there. On offense, I see some Clint Capella in there. I think he's a long-term starting center, even if he's a guy that struggles at the free throw line, might not have all the polish in the world. Like, I just buy it. What's been sort of your journey with Missi? Is he a guy that you see as a starter, or do you think, hey, maybe these field concerns, maybe he's more of like a backup big or a guy who struggles to catch on?
Yeah, no, I like your comparison to both Nick Claxton and Capella. I was thinking Capella a little bit. No, Missi's solid. I definitely say more like a backup at this point, just because he feels kind of raw to me, you know. And mind you,
Sure,
his
sure.
game is still developing, and he's again another guy we talked about who hasn't been playing basketball for very long. So still getting it together. And considering all that, he's incredibly fluid, right? Good
Yeah.
mobile guy. Love his activity. Love his athleticism. And I think good rim protector, but he does jump a lot. Like you nod your head up and he's flying by. And so like that is something that caught my eye for sure watching some tape.
Mhm.
And also offensively, I mean, I definitely would like him to do more. At this point, Capella and
Yeah.
Claxton make perfect sense because he is literally a play finisher. I love his touch around the rim.
Mhm.
I really hope there's some potential with the jump shot, even if it's like free throw line extent, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Obviously, that sort of hope there. But yeah, right now offensively, guy who can, finish through contact, playing the pick and roll, but he's more of your kind of get his buckets on putbacks and dump downs, things of that nature. And defensively, yeah, I think you're right. Like he's somebody he can kind of wreak havoc there. He is quick. Like he does get some good steals, and I definitely enjoy that. And I think he has a good feel for when to roll to the rim and
Totally.
catching the ball
Yes.
on the way there. I've noticed that. I really enjoyed. Okay, this is when I go hard. This is when I kind of come down to let the guard snake in between. That sort of
Mhm.
rhythm. That most big men it's kind of touch and go. You know.
For sure. And I think like something else I talked about in the article is like there's a real degree of selflessness to his screening where
Hmm.
he is willing to just screen, rescreen, screen off the ball. And like a lot of bigs don't set good off ball screens in college because they're
No,
like, what am I getting out of
I'm
this?
not rolling. I'm not getting this at the end of this action.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And Missi, like he does it. Like I think there's a real just like I'm gonna do what I need to do to help my guards and help my team and help guys get shots. And that just I don't know. I really value that.
absolutely.
I do understand your concerns with the feet because like the one game just from like the flyby issue that I always think of was like against Florida. I think it was Tyrese Samuel, their center, who's like one of those college centers who's good, like not great, but just a good college center. And there was a
Hmm.
couple, like multiple post plays where he just got exactly where he wanted on VC. And it's like, that's scary. That's scary that a guy I've
Yeah,
never been like, oh yeah, he's an NBA player is just like, I will use a pump fake here and I will
it
get
gets you.
exactly what I want as a result.
Yeah, and not even like always the like flying by, but even like the subtle shift, and now you're out of position, and I have an up and under, or
Mhm,
a different move because I literally like maneuvered you into a position because I know you have happy feet.
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, I think like for me, it's just for every one of those, there's the plays where like Kyle Filipowski pump fakes on the perimeter and drives and does a spin move, and Misi's just sliding his feet with him the entire time and swats him at the
Hmm.
rim. Like
He get
for
nothing.
every one of those, there's another one on the positive side, and I just get so excited with Misi because I feel like so many of the issues he has are common among young bigs, and I'm
That's
really
fair.
optimistic about what he's going to be. So we're gonna take one more break, and we're gonna get into the sicko session and talk about some sleepers. So stick with us. All right. So there was a guy that you brought up. I love both your sleepers this week, by the way.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
one who's generated a lot of buzz lately is Hunter Salis at Wake Forest, who is a 6'5" guard. Kind of like, I don't want to say came out of nowhere. He was a super highly touted recruit, top 15 in his high school class, goes to Gonzaga, does some good stuff on defense, but just never really like gets into the starting lineup. Sort of a fine energy bench player, transfers to Wake Forest, and this year averaging 18 points per game on 47, 35, 79 splits. Uh, man, didn't really see this coming. I was kind of just expecting him to be a good college defender, and now he looks like he might be a lot more than that. What intrigues you about Hunter Salis?
I would say the growing offensive skill set.
Hmm.
Like obviously, like the playmaking is something that maybe he needs to work on. But like in general, like yeah, solid shooter. But I mean, I've loved his jump shot. I think he gets good elevation on it. But I really think that he is one of the better finishers that I've seen.
Hmm.
And his ability to kind of get in and be versatile in his movements and the way he gets to the basket, the way he finishes the basket, like he's become a lot better of a scorer. Where you're right, like okay, a defender, can he make a shot, keep you honest, that sort of thing. After his first year, but this year, maybe he put the work in. Like there's so much more of a well-rounded offensive skill set if
Hmm.
nothing else, just for putting the ball in the basket. I mean, knowing that okay, at the next level you can attack a closeout. At the next level, you can use your frame to your advantage in terms of finishing among the trees and finishing with craft. And I love his athleticism. Putting it all together that way, I think, has really helped him out in a big way offensive. And I think that's helped him up. That and of course, being a good perimeter defender. Quick hands, pesky, annoying, that sort of thing. So basically, what you said, what he brought defensively, but bringing in that increased offensive skill set, I think has really been cool to see. And I gotta agree, I wasn't quite expecting it.
Mhm. Yeah, he's always been a good defender. Like he's always had the length, the quickness, kind of the grit and toughness. That's always been part of his game.
Absolutely.
Uh, as a heads up, my daughter just got done with bath time, so you're about to
Uh,
hear a lot of running around and partying in
all
the
good.
background going on with her. But Salis is I think the biggest thing that stands out too is just like how he's better leveraging those athletic tools on the offensive end. I
Yeah.
love like the speed and change of direction, especially off the ball to like set up his cuts. Now that he's shooting, and I would say where I'm a little bit more dubious, where I don't have Salis in draftable range quite yet, but I think he can get there, obviously. Is he's about 35% from three. The volume is good. He's taking almost 6 a game. But now that he's taking those threes and he's getting that respect from defenses, he can use that to cut back to the rim. He's so seamless in how he changes direction. He's got massive explosion off 2 feet. Like he's really putting that together. And you mentioned like the ball skills thing. It's kind of lagging behind a little bit for where you want it to be for a guy who like Chuck from Chucking Darts will use the phrase occasionally like a not quite wing, where like he's just like a little undersized to be like a
Yeah.
true 2-3. He's probably just a two at the NBA level. Um, but I think that's in there, and it's definitely getting better. He's seeing the floor a little bit more. He does have that kind of wiggle and athleticism punch combination. Who do you kind of see his game at the NBA level like comparable to? Like, do you see him as like almost like a Grayson Allen type? Which I know like everyone hates Grayson Allen, so maybe not the best comp, but like one
Yeah.
of those like athletic shooting guards, it's kind of like defense first and kind of fills in the gaps. Is a finisher and shooter. Like, what do you kind of see him doing in the NBA?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's a good fit. I'm trying to think of. I feel like there's been a few of those guards in Brooklyn. Like you said, like
Yeah,
a
there's way
scout.
more of him than I thought. Like, I was, like,
Hmm.
starting to go through just, like, NBA player lists, and I was like, "There's kinda more guys in this role than I would have anticipated."
Yeah, or like a more offensive competent, like Dennis Smith in a way.
Sure, yeah,
Like
mhm.
I wish that's one thing. I wish he had more bulk.
Yeah,
As well. Like
yes,
we
I
got,
agree. If he was, like, 215, 220 pounds, I'd
yeah.
feel awesome about him.
Exactly, because even then, if he's not playing the three because of size, he at least can hold up from a strength perspective. Whereas right
Mhm,
now, like you say, he's a two. But I feel like an undersized guard, but someone who's going to still, or not undersized guard, a good sized guard, undersized wing, but
mhm,
somebody who's going to kind of get after it defensively, and make you pay on the offensive end. I'm going to go Dennis Smith Jr. I think Dennis Smith Jr. is a guy. I'm not similar size wise in that way, but
mhm,
close enough. But like offensively, I like um his game a little bit more
mhm.
than Smith's, at least for what he brings off the table
Yep,
from the jump. But that same like if Dennis Smith Jr. was a few and stuff, like he can hold up still. He's a bigger,
yeah,
older player at this stage of his career, more in his prime. But like when he first came, the versatility he showed defensively, I thought was solid
for sure,
potential.
for sure. Next guy we're talking about is a guy who definitely has that bulk, a guy that I really like. I know Matt Powers from Versailles is a guy who's tweeted about him. Tam Lipy at Iowa State is a guy I wanted to talk about. I love this dude. Listed at 6'1", probably not 6'1", but
I
I do
know.
I do think he is 200 pounds, which is what he's listed at. Leads Iowa State in like every statistical category. He's 14.7 points per game, almost 6 boards per game, despite that height, 6 assists, 3.4 steals per game, shooting almost 40% from three after being 20% on less than one attempt per game a year ago. I just love this dude. I am like Mr. Anti-small guard. With Lipsy, he is so competitive, so smart, so slithery, but still so strong. I love the improvement with the jump shot. I think it's one of those things that like speaks volumes about a player when they get that much better at shooting in that short of a time span. I just think he's good at everything and super competitive and has that body type that small guards need to stick. Like, I don't want to say he's Fred VanVleet because I think that's like a really high end outcome, but I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. I think Tam and Lipsy, I think I had him at like 64 on my board. The more I think about him, the more I'm just like, I think I'm going to put him in draftable range the next time I make a board because like,
wow, okay.
I just buy it. Everyone else I talked to is like, I'm still not so sure about the shot. He's still really small. Do you want to talk me off the ledge on Lipsy, or are you someone that also kind of sees a long-term future for him?
I'm positive on him. I will say that.
Okay.
Like, I have loved the fact that, like you said, he has been someone who is smart. He's a solid guard who gets you in your offense, and he's somebody who can run the show, but is a connector. Like, he doesn't mind making a pass to get in the move, even if he's not involved in the primary action, and still making a smart read to keep the offense humming. And I think that's really smart. It speaks to his basketball IQ, in terms of that level. But he's always getting them kind of into their offense and controlled. Defensively, gets a lot of steals. Gotta love that. Offensively, I was worried because if you're a small guard who's shaky on a shooter, yikes.
No margin for error. No margin for error.
No, not at all. You're right. And so Fred VanVleet would be like an amazing high-end outcome because a high motor, a guy who's active defensively, a solid playmaker, and a very good shooter. And so that's why, the improvement he's made shooting basketball this season has been great. It's definitely something that I'm excited about. Now, is it enough? I mean, the numbers are better. But I need them to be. I'm not saying you need to be like a knockdown shooter at 6'1", but let's
kind of do.
It's not 6 foot. That's what I'm gonna say. You kind of do. Like, you just do, and it is what it is. And he's not quite there yet. If it continues, then you can make a case for it. And he's a guy that I'm trying to think of
another sophomore. He's got time. Like,
exactly.
It doesn't have to be this year.
No, and I think a better case for another year of experience. Of that, you continue to make, improvements on your shooting. You've obviously shown that that's something that you can put the work in that's been done for you. And I think, bump that up another 3-4 percentage points, right? At that point, if we're talking 38, 39, okay. Then we go, okay, basketball IQ, the intangibles he brings in, the fact he'll compete on the defensive end, the high motor, and he's shooting around 40% from three. Like, that's enough for me to take a shot on you and feel good about that,
For sure.
Whereas right now, like I feel better. If I did, it wouldn't be like a total bad, like, undrafted two-way guy, something like that. I'm not mad at it, but I'm definitely not like quite like on the board just yet. Although I've really loved his game this season.
I think that's more than reasonable. Let's get to Harrison Ingram at North Carolina. This is one of the guys that you brought up. I like what I've seen from him a lot. Like a guy 6'8", 230, just has that NBA size on him. I think he's gotten a little bit better athletically. But the real big difference for him this year has been the shot. 13.1 points per game, 43% from the field, but a career high from three, 42.6% from three. Still struggling at the free throw line, 60.8% the free throw line, but he does everything else. Almost 7 boards a game, 2.6 assists to 1.4 turnovers. Always been a marvelous decision maker and has a good handle for his size. That was there at Stanford. Looking a lot better on defense too. Good steal and block rates. What do you attribute, like, because I've got him like 40s right now, 30s, 40s. What do you attribute like people being lower on him too? Is it just like an anchoring bias thing, or like what do you think is going on here?
I feel like he's almost like a do it all kind of, you see do it all around game, but yet you see him there like consistently. I feel like maybe specializing in one of those things really well.
Sure.
Like he's somebody potentially, I think, big wing forward, can kind of play 2, 3, maybe a little bit of 4, can shoot a little bit, knows how to kind of keep the ball moving. He knows the game, flashes some playmaking, some scoring. I just feel like it's not all there consistently. And maybe that's what I've noticed. Like 7 games, okay, shooting the as we said, well out the ball. He's shooting the ball really, really well, right? Other games, like he's a good guy in terms of creating his own shot, getting to the mid-range, finishing around the basket. I think with his build, like he can be a problem down there. I just think consistency-wise is not altogether there. And maybe that's a thing because he's been really good as a ball handler pick and roll. So you look at him as a possible good playmaker. I love his feel. I feel like it's gotten better. But yeah, it's just as a point forward, which is what I think he more is at this point in my mind. He's not as he almost reminds me of a nope. I'm gonna say it's not even a comparison. It's a type. It's this type of play, like
Yeah,
a Harrison Barnes. And I say
sure.
that in the sense of like, okay, you have the skills for this, but like I just don't see it all the time. But you're
Hmm.
consistent, but it's not great. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
like he's never terrible. Like I
There
never
you
watch a
go.
game and I'm like Harrison Ingram is killing North Carolina right now. But
Yeah,
there's some games where he's just really not making shots, and it's like,
yeah.
okay, well, like now the defense isn't respecting you, and like you've got this other stuff that you can do, but like I don't know, is it like moving the needle in a real way?
Yeah.
Like,
And then he's not really aggressive in my mind that much, or not assertive in that way. And I don't know if
yeah,
that's like because of his shot, because you're right, he's not like a very good shooter, but I feel like leveraging the playmaking feel that he does have by being able to be more consistent on the offensive end from a scoring perspective. I don't know. That's a great question because it was so weird watching it to go, what is it that I'm not like? By all accounts, I should like him a lot more, and yet
mhm.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to imagine like not being more excited about a guy who's like 6'8" with like a near 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio that's like 40% from three. But it's just like
Yes.
the fear of the past years, the free throw stuff, and like the off games, like where the shot isn't falling. It's like, yeah, you do enough other stuff, but like I feel like he needs that shot given like where he's at athletically. Like he's just a pretty good athlete, and that's it.
Yeah, and I'm not a like I'm by no means a shot doctor. I shoot. I very much have like a Kevin Martin kind of shot, so I'm not here to talk about that in that way. But I
Hmm.
feel like his lower body is super stiff when he shoots.
Hmm.
And so it
Yeah.
makes it a shot that isn't versatile. It's a very super stiff like set shot. So the offensive creation for its own shot isn't super great. And also like it needs a moment. Like it's not something that just it's not even like a Tyrese Halliburton with the set shot, but he can get that thing gone. Like you
Hmm.
need a second. And it's not Kyle Anderson shooting, but
No, 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 no.
it's not like a quick shot either. And so I think just from what I've seen, like his shot looks good up top from what I've seen, but I do feel like the base is not as fluid.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say I think again in this like I know this is a kind of a frustrating point to come back to from like a team side, but I think with like evaluating prospects, it's important. Like these kind of guys do get multiple chances. Usually, like I think about a guy like Delano Banton, who
Mhm.
like, you know, kind of came out of the gate really well for Toronto, fell out of favor, and like now is in Boston, is like getting an opportunity there. Like I do think when you are a certain size, if you have high feel, you just kind of don't like you're not going to totally stink. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of worth something. Like the not embarrassing himself factor at the NBA level is going to be a real thing for him. And I think that will
Yeah.
help.
No, I can agree with that for sure.
So let's close it out with Kevin Cross at Tulane. Wild year for him. He's had two 20-plus point triple doubles this season. Super well rounded, another kind of point forward type guy. 16 points, almost 8 boards, and 5 assists per game. About 2.3 total stocks per game. A guy I wrote about in my column on unique players. Um, I really like Kevin Cross, and I think he's just 6'8" and like absolutely knows how to play. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for thriving as the leading man and leading creator for this Tulane team, but also having his best defensive season to date. He's a graduate, so he is an older player, and I think that's going to hurt him a little bit. But he's 6'8". He really knows how to play. He's showing an increased level of versatility on defense. I think he's played a lot tougher this year, both around the rim on defense, but also as a finisher. I just really like his mental makeup as a whole. I think he's a really sharp player. I think he's a competitive player, always looking to get other guys involved. And I do think this is a role that can scale down pretty well just because we've seen it with so many just power forwards that can swing the ball. The shot has to be a more consistent thing is the big hang up. Always been really low volume from three. Good free throw shooter over the course of his career. 37.5% from three this year, but only taking two a game. He's going to have to take more threes at the NBA level.
Yeah.
But I think he's a guy that, like, look at how many teams are now running actions where they give it to guy at the elbow or at the nail or things like that. And then from there, that player makes a decision, or they screen and then make a decision from there. That is a guy who can do those things well on offense. I worry about his physical strength scaling up. I worry about the three. But I think if nothing else, he's probably like a two-way guy. And I think if he gets hot during the combine process, he's a guy who could get drafted. Um, any kind of takeaways for you on Kevin Cross?
I kind of agree. I agree. Like a solid
Mhm.
kind of fill in the blanks guy. You know, good passer. I think that jump shot's definitely something that needs to improve because if not, I feel like he's going
Mhm.
to be like a tweener, a classic tweener, like the worst way. You know?
Yes. Yeah. Because like he doesn't have the strength to play the 5. He's
Mm-mm.
already going to be kind of skinny for an NBA 4. Like he's one of those
Mm-hmm.
guys that's like listed at 225, but you look at the body and it's not like he's not like a chiseled 225, and like some of
No.
it like some games he kind of just looks like a little lanky out there too. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't
It's weird.
love the frame. Yeah,
And
it's a little
players
odd.
he can struggle to defend like quicker players too sometimes
I
in
worry
weird
about who he
moments.
guards. Yeah,
Yeah,
like that's
that's
the
what makes
thing
it.
is like I think he knows what's happening when you're that big and you know what's going on the court. Like that goes a long way. But yeah, I think bigger guys can kind of get where they want against him, and I don't love him against like NBA guards. So
No, I don't. That's what I'm saying. If you can shoot, like again, like shooting, you're a big man, you can shoot great. Like, it's one of those
mhm,
things where a bigger player that can shoot, and then like some of the effort is there and the IQ is there, and like you said, the intangibles of him being a guy, what he brings from playmaking from the elbow or some action that can kind of get him involved there, and then hide him on one of your lesser defensive perimeter threats.
mhm.
That might work for him. But right now, like if you can't consistently shoot, and like free throw line's great, but you're not aggressive enough to even get there on a regular basis anyway. So
Oh,
it's one of those things that I definitely worry about. And defensively, that's kind of the big thing for me. It's okay. Well, like you bring effort, but where exactly do you fit? Like, what is your case for
mhm.
being on the floor? And at
Yeah.
the next level. And
And
I
it's tricky too, because like Tulane plays him at the 5 on defense, and it's like that's not what you're gonna
don't know.
do.
No,
Like
he's
you know what I mean? Like it's just like it makes it like a tricky evaluation because it's like there's
yeah.
no way
Mm-mm.
that like
Mm-mm.
he cannot play the 5 in the NBA. Like he just
No.
can't. But I think if he
I mean, he
shoots it
could, but
during the pre-draft process, it's just like I think a team's gonna take him. Like there's 6'8" guy averaging 5 assists a game is wild. Like
yeah.
that is not something you see very often. Like
Mm-mm.
he is so smart. Um, I just think that's worth something. Like
Yeah.
I think a
A
team's got to
connected
kick
big
the
man
tires on a
playmaker.
two way. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm at with him. So we're gonna wrap it up right there, Corbin. Thank you so much. Like it's been a blast to have you on the show.
Oh
Where
yeah.
can people find you and find your work?
Well, first off, Maxwell, thank you so much. Again, big fan of you and your work. Big fan of all the folks at No Ceilings. I love it. So definitely wanted to give a shout out there. Thank y'all.
For sure.
And then you can find me on Twitter X at Corbin NBA CORBAN NBA. Check out roster reconstruction with Switch Theory. Check out Roundball Ramble on Sports Ethos. But a lot of podcasting. I love doing it. Love talking. These
Mhm.
conversations are great. Hopefully, some more writing in the future. But that's you can find me there on Instagram as well. Though if you go to Instagram, it's really just so I can get the follows. I'm not an Instagram person. I'm shameless
Not
plug
either.
there.
Yeah.
No, I'm an old
Mhm.
old person when it comes to Instagram.
I'm right there with you. Make sure you're following me on Twitter as well at Boundboards, BAUM boards. Follow No Ceilings on Twitter at No Ceilings NBA and subscribe to NoCeilingsNBA.com Substack. I'm going to plug my Yves Missi column. That'll be out by the time you're listening to this, most likely. Also, working on a piece for No Ceilings Plus this week, some more spreadsheet sleepers, some more guys that are profiling really well statistically that are not getting a lot of buzz right now. Kind of going more multi-year and focusing on really high field players this week.
Okay.
So stay tuned for that on No Ceilings Plus. But yeah, I think that'll do it. Corbin, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
thank you to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you all next week. Have a great day.